Hello and welcome to another DIY vlog. Yes, another one. Oh, Ambassador, with all these DIY vlogs, you are spoiling us. This is, however, nothing like the mega project that was the solar panel install in the last video. Rather, this is a bit of a mishmash really, a compilation of little tiny jobs I've needed to do around the boat over the last few months, starting with a bit of painting. There will always be rust spots on a steel narrowboat, and over the years mine has developed unsightly blemishes on the sides of the bow, along the gunnels, and on the back deck where I stand when steering. The treatment is nothing special. Sand out the offending rust so far as is practical, here using my multi-tool. Then any remaining rust and the bare metal can be treated. I tend to use furtan, which likes to have a bit of water added in order to work. This seems counterintuitive, but it's what the instructions say. 24 hours later and a primer can be applied. I'm not trying to make this invisible like some work of art, because before long there'll be new rust spots bubbling up, so it's pointless trying to be a perfectionist about it. All I want is the metal not rusting. Next I gave those spots 2 lots of undercoat, with light sanding between each coat. And finally a dab of top coat, again 2 layers with light sanding in between. I also did some bits at the back by the rear hatch, which seems to be a magnet for tiny nicks and scrapes. The new paint shows up against the old, but at least it's not rusty anymore. Pity about the ever-present bird poo. The next job was these, which I'd already renovated about 3 years ago, but the sun and rain had worked away at them, so they needed redoing. The seats are held on with 3 screws each underneath, so apart from frightening the spiders, it's a trivial task to remove them. A bit of sanding back to raw wood left the seats in a position to receive 3 coats of Ronseal wood stain, with a few hours between each coat. Thus darkened to a rich mahogany, 3 coats of yacht varnish were also applied with, you guessed it, light sanding between them. Oh, glorious, glorious sanding. There's no place that isn't dusty in the boat, so you just have to hope for the best while the varnish dries. And then they're easily reattached onto their metal supports. That job ticked off, the next comes up the list. Another potential problem I've got to deal with here is the stove. A stove should be given a good clear out before the start of winter so that it's all ready to be used, and clean inside, not just of old muck, but check the fire bricks and things like that. As you can see, the fire brick there at the back on the left is cracked, and the others are not in great condition. There's a crack on that one there, and cracks on those ones there. And you'd think, okay, well, take them out, buy some new ones, all set. However, the ones that are in there at the back, like that one at the back on the right, it's absolutely solid. It's kind of welded itself to the back of the stove. You can't just pull it off. The bit on the top left that's come apart, that comes off, but the bit below it is solidly welded to the stove. And then these ones on the left, well, they're held in below by the grate, at the front by the lip of the stove, and then above by that metal lip. So how the dickens do I get them out? Even if I remove the ones at the back, there isn't enough space to get those ones out. Now, I emailed the people who used to make this stove. It's no longer in production. And their email reply just talked about a lip at the front. And I'd sent them photographs saying, no, I'm talking about this lip over the top. And they haven't come back to me again with a further reply, so they have no advice on how I get these out, or how I put new ones in. Somebody has told me that the grate should come out, but as far as I'm aware, the grate is underneath the fire bricks. So grate in first, fire bricks on top. But then again, that runs into the problem of, well then, how do I get them in underneath that lip? That is welded to the stove. It is a part of the stove. I think this is going to involve my favourite engineering implement, the hammer. And then I'll be able to get them out and hopefully work out a way to put some new ones in, possibly by lying them horizontally instead of vertically.
Hammering ensued.
Half an hour later, and after quite a lot of ultra-violence and also quite a lot of mess, I've managed to chisel and hammer out those fire bricks from the side. And in fact, it turns out they go down to the side of the grate, which, having taken them out, is now slightly loose. I mean, everything was solidly in there. It was like it was cemented in. I remember when I took the top of the chimney off, the bit that's outside, the collar, and that was like cemented in with grot from many years of using the stove, and these fire bricks are about the same. However, we're generally getting there, and once they're out, I think I can put some other ones in. Hopefully. Goodness me, that took quite a lot of thumping. But they are all out. And what is more, I can now get that grate up as well, which was also fairly solid, and give that a good clean. So this stove is going to have a jolly good clean out before I put some new fire bricks in. Of course, I've got to this point and I don't actually have any replacement fire bricks to put in, so I can't now use the stove till I get those, but hey, it's a start. And there I have one thoroughly cleaned out stove, awaiting some new fire bricks, so I better go and order those.
They arrived just a few days later, custom cut to my measurements, but in need of a tiny trim on one of them, just 1 millimetre or so, and the vermiculite is easy to cut with the multi-tool.
And here is the refurbed fire grate down the bottom, all cleaned up a bit. You may not be able to tell, but it is. And 6 new carefully measured fire bricks around the edges. I had to do a little bit of cutting, but they're in. All looking very smart. It seems a shame to light a fire in there and cause them to get mucky. But I will. That's what they're there for.
One of the quickest yet itchiest jobs was patching up the heat shielding around the engine exhaust. Over the years, part of the fiberglass fabric had rotted away, leaving a section dangling down that needed to be redone. I cut away the plastic ties that I'd previously used as a temporary bodge, and then discovered I'd stupidly draped the end of my new shielding into the bucket of bilge grime. Words were said aloud. Luckily, there was enough of it still clean that I could wrap it around the missing section, held in place with stainless cable ties. Every 4 years, a narrowboat has to have a Boat Safety Scheme inspection, the dreaded BSS. Here's Justin, the examiner, getting deep into the bowels of the boat with his checklist. He told me the rules had recently been tightened up, and that was bad news for me.
Well, annoyingly, the boat failed its boat safety certificate inspection by 4 points, of which 3 are relatively easy to fix, and the 4th might be troublesome. But I've only got 2 weeks to do it because the old BSS expires on the beginning of October. The first point is in the gas locker, and you can see the 2 gas bottles there, each of which has a hose coming out the top of it which goes down to a regulator. Well, apparently this hose, even though it's only 6 years old, is starting to show signs of fraying. So I need to unscrew that from the gas bottle and from where it goes into the regulator and swap it with a new one. Here is that new one, and it should just be a question of unscrewing the old one, putting that one on.
Taking the old hose off, putting the new hose on.
One new hose in, just screwed into the bottle there, and screwed onto the regulator there. It's a reverse thread on the bottle and a normal thread on the regulator, and the regulator side has a washer, so you don't over tighten it, I was told. Anyway, I will now test for leaks. I have soapy dishwater and also my tried and tested gas sniffer. There are two further things here in the gas locker. That regulator, as you can see, is kind of exposed when you look at it in relation to the gas bottles, and it needs some sort of cage around it so that if the gas bottles shifted backwards for any reason, I suppose in a substantial collision, the bottles need not to thump into the regulator here. It's quite acceptable to get some chunks of wood that stick out further than the regulator and glue them onto the metal, just form a little cage around it. And then the final thing in here is that pipe coming out the bottom of the regulator and going up there runs for more than 150 millimeters before it gets to that mounting junction, and the regs say there can't be a run of more than 150 millimeters without some support, so I have to glue another bit of wood down there somewhere and then put another pipe clip onto that, and again that's fairly straightforward. As luck would have it, I have some bits that might be useful for this from when I was building my camper van. And by the way, if you're unaware of my camper van channel, do go and have a look at Vandemonium here on YouTube.
Bits of wood were cut to the right length to surround the gas regulator. A degreasing spray from the WD-40 company was used to clean the metalwork nearby of any muck. It's very good stuff, this, though it stinks to high heaven and is not supposed to be inhaled. I've used it on loads of things that need cleaning before glue is applied, and nothing's yet fallen off. Justin had suggested using no more nails, and its claimed adhesion strength is phenomenal, so I gave it a go. There's the final U-shaped wooden structure glued into place, though I used screws to mount the crosspiece in case it ever needs to come off. That should protect the regulator, and believe me, it really is stuck in place very firmly indeed. As for the gas pipe, which needed extra clamps, here's how that turned out. Not pretty, but functional. A similar approach had to be taken in the cupboard next to the oven, where some of the pipe sections didn't now meet regulations, and so needed a couple of wooden chocks glued on, with pipe clamps screwed into them. This was faintly irritating, as the amount by which the pipes were over the limit was just a few millimetres by and large, and in 21 years there's never been a problem, but comply I must in order to get my certificate. Now for the most awkward fix, and it's in the battery bay. My batteries are held in place by a metal frame, which prevents them moving forwards, backwards or sideways, but not upwards, which is against the rules. And that slab of wood held with a strap doesn't count, apparently. Notwithstanding that narrowboats are not known for jumping into the air, I had to work out a clamp, and it's harder than it sounds because there's nothing to attach such a device to at either end of the battery tray, and drilling into the metal at the bottom there is straight into the canal. You don't want to do that. But No More Nails holds 50 kilograms per square centimetre, so I glued a 30 by 4 centimetre block of wood to the end. That's a notional holding strength of 5.7 tonnes. To that I added a hook, on which was a chain with a tensioner wrapped around a metal bar covered in gaffer tape to make it non-conductive, which stretches across the batteries. It's prevented from touching the end terminals by going through the battery handle. And at the far end, another tension chain hooks under the battery as it is in the open air at that point. Thus the batteries are going nowhere, and the boat duly passed its boat safety scheme inspection. Job's well done, time for tea.